thank you. That was really good. How could I join the choir? What would I need to do? Is it Tuesday nights that you meet? Tuesday nights. Tuesday nights for me. You want me to come on Tuesday night? That's the deal. I know you.
It's a special time just for you.
A special time just for me.
Tuesday night.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Don't we love Hart Morris? Isn't it wonderful to see Hart here? And his lovely bride, Martha. So it's always good to see Marty as well. So, okay, I'm really excited about today. I'm very anxious to hear what I'm going to say. So this ought to be a good message today. We're talking about David Brooks and the second mountain. And remember, we talked about how that there was a first mountain, and with the first mountain, there we go. Come on. Oops. You got to be gentle with this. Okay. So, before we get there, let me tell you, remind you also, it's in your bulletin, but the WCA, Wesleyan Covenant Association, is going to be we're going to be hosting them this coming Saturday. They'll be here Thursday, Friday, but Saturday is our day. Our modern worship team will be leading us in music. We'll have some great speakers. There's some things going on within the denomination, within the United Methodist Church. It's uncharted waters. We don't know what's going to be taking place. And so the WCA is a group that is representing the traditional, the Orthodox view, and we need you here. And so this is going to be a major thing. We think in General Conference of May of 2020 that there could be some seismic shifts and changes within the denomination. And so if you're available, I know Saturdays are sacred, but if you can join us, you don't have to come the whole day. 9 to 4 is when it's going to be held, and we'll have it be inspiring, be informational. We're the host, so I feel somewhat responsible to have a good group of us represented. So there's information of how you can check in and be part of that day. So we just want to again remind you of that. So Tuesday nights, huh? What time is that? 6 o'clock? Is that what it is? Okay, so we're talking about, this is supposed to be a mountain. And we talked about that there is the mountain of success. And so there's nothing wrong with being successful. In fact, the reason I have this is because somebody who was successful in business donated the money so we'd be able to do some upgrades in our cameras, and this was part of the deal, so I don't have to draw on the easel anymore that you couldn't see. So this is now available to us because somebody was successful. But he talks in the book about how it is that when he was divorced, that he went through a valley, and it was very disturbing. And so, but the good thing about that was that he found that there is another mountain, and hence the name, the second mountain. And this one is about significance. And so significance is something that is different than success. You can make a lot of money and you can be happy, but there is a limitation to happiness when it's about accumulation of things. And that's pretty much what success is. I'm going to have more, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that, but that sort of fulfillment never seems to come with success and with happiness. There's something more. Jesus said, what does it profit a person to gain the whole world and lose their soul? So significance is about a different word, and it's about joy. It doesn't mean that this is easy, but it does mean that there are two mountains, not just one. And some people are never going to know success. They're never going to make millions of dollars, but they can live with significance. And some of the poorest people you'll ever meet will be people that are living with significance. On the other hand, you can do both of these together. So sometimes we go through the valley when we say, is that all there is? Sometimes we go through the valley when there is a breakdown in a relationship, or when we lose our job, or the stock market crashes. There's all kinds of ways that we can lose our success and our happiness. But if we are living with significance and with joy, then this does not dissipate. This stays with us. So he describes on here that there are 4 foundations, and today I want to talk about the first of these pillars. He calls them the 4 pillars, and this is vocation. So we're going to talk about vocation today, and the text is on page 1176. It's comes to us from Second Thessalonians chapter 3. And I'm going to do the reading, but take your Bibles and turn with me there. And so Paul is writing to the Thessalonians. There is a concern. He's got really two concerns that's taking place, is that there are folks that are living with idleness. They're being idle, and that is a real concern. The backdrop of this is persecution. The church is being persecuted, and how do you respond? So these are kind of the two themes that he's going to develop, but for purposes today, we'll focus on the idleness. I would invite you tonight at 6 o'clock to join us in the chapel as we will pray for the persecuted church. And so we need to do that. And so join us tonight, 6 o'clock, because this was what was taking place, the backdrop going on in much of the New Testament era. So Paul writes in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 6, now we command you. So he's going to be very blunt. This is like a military officer. I command you, brothers, in the name of our Lord Jesus, that you, this is interesting, you keep away from any brother who is walking in idleness and not in accord with the tradition that you receive from us. So there are traditions that were important, not just Scripture, but there are traditions, there are ways we do this. And so Paul instructed them. And he says, for you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us. So not just do as I say, but do as I do, because we were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but with toil and labor we worked night and day, that we might not be a burden to anyone. And remember in Acts 18, it tells us Paul had a trade. He was a tent maker. And so that's what he was doing. He didn't want to be sponging off anybody else. It was not because we did not have that right to ask for funds, but to give you in ourselves an example to imitate. For even when we were with you, we would give you this command. So he uses it the second time, the word command. If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. If anyone is not willing to work, that is, they are refusing to work. That is, he's not saying if you're, unable to work. That's not what he's saying. He's saying if you refuse to work, that you are able-bodied, and there's a job for you, and you say, no, I'm not going to do that, then either they were doing it because they thought, well, Jesus is coming back, why do I need to work? Or most likely they were sponging off other people. Have you ever had that? Have you ever been around a sponge person? They just take, never give. You know what that does to communities? You know what it does to families? And sometimes when you enable that behavior and you just keep giving and giving and giving, it doesn't help the person. This is what he's talking about. Don't enable people to be irresponsible. Make them take responsibility for their own lives. For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. In other words, they were working. They were working at meddling. They were in everybody's business. Do you know people like that? Oh, let's talk about that, let's gossip so we can pray better, that sort of a thing, This is what's going on. This is a busy body. They're working at disrupting and causing destruction within relationships. And so don't have anything to do with busybodies. Always talking about something else, creating trouble and strife. Don't associate with those folks. Just shut them off. Now such persons we command. Here's the third time he uses the word. And encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. As for you brothers, do not grow weary in doing good. So this is an interesting thing because he's talking about how important it is to work. And he says it in a little better language and more positive in Colossians chapter 3, verse 22, verse 23. And he says, whatever you do, work heartily. So it's interesting because I think a lot of times that we associate work with sin and the fall. But if you will look in the Old Testament, you will see that in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, God Almighty was at work. And he worked for 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. God was working. God was at work, which is very different. The Hebrew God is very different than the mythological gods of the Greeks and the Romans. The Greeks and the Romans were frolicking around, having fun and fighting and causing wars, and they were in love and all kinds of crazy stuff. They were just projections of themselves. That's what they were. His Hebrew God, though, is totally different. The mythologies would not recognize the Hebrew God. Totally different, because this God is at work. And so we see that God is working in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, and he finally quits working. It's called Shabbat, Sabbath, on the seventh day. He ceased from his labors. And if you look in chapter 2, I think it's verse 15, Adam is working before chapter 3. Adam is working before sin entered the world, because God wanted us to be able to create things. Work is the opportunity to create. There's more to life than just work, but work is part of life, and it can be meaningful. And so that's what he's trying to say. And so there is this struggle that we have sometimes in not understanding that work has its proper place. And we don't want to work too much. We don't want to work too hard. We need to have Sabbath. There's some breaks on that and some rails, some boundaries. And we don't want to let work become too big where we worship our work, but we don't want it to be too small where we end up with idleness and not working at all. And so there is this proper balance. Now, in David Brooks' book, he's talking about vocation, and that is a Latin word, actually, vocare, which means to call. And with that, the idea was that there can be something more than just work, because work can be transactional. And there have been times I've had jobs that were transactional. Probably the number one transactional job I ever had was when I was in seminary and drove a school bus. That was work. I was a bus driver in the hills of Kentucky, the back roads of Kentucky. One of the happiest days of the lives of students in Jessamine County was when I gave the bus a wedgie. I wedged it in, I backed it out. It had been raining, and I backed it out, and I got the bus stuck. They had to call a tow truck and come get the bus out of the mud. The students absolutely loved me. It wasn't their fault. They were late for school for a couple of hours. And I've had some other jobs that were transactional. Dana and I worked at ORU, and we called our job, she had one in the girls' dorm, I had one in the boys' dorm, and we called it Toilets of Tulsa, because we cleaned the toilets in the restrooms. That was what we did just to get some extra money. So I've had those transactional jobs, and I understand that. But there is a sense in which Brooks is talking about vocare, a calling that God has called us in certain ways. Let me illustrate with this. So in 1997 was the first time I took a group with me to Israel. And that year I met this wonderful guy by the name of Igal. And he's a bus driver. And Igal is just a wonderful, wonderful guy. Courteous, kind, hospitable, goes out of his way to take care of our folks. And so every year I would say, I want Igal. Well, one year we didn't get Igal. We got this other guy, and I'm going to call him Tommy. That's not his real name. But Tommy was the opposite of Igal. He was rude. He kind of had an attitude, and you could tell he didn't really like what he was doing. Igal was an amazing driver. Tommy was okay, but we had two altercations while we were driving. One time I'm sitting in the front of the bus. I thought we were going to have a wreck. And he was just angry. He was an angry man. And so it was just really very noticeable. He even got in an argument with our guide, Yoav, about where we should go. A bus driver doesn't tell the guide, who's working with a company, what to do. But this guy was trying to do it. Well, at the very last day, we went back into this room. We had lunch, and I'm visiting with Tommy. And Tommy said that he had been an owner of restaurants in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and the Intifada started. That was when the suicide bombers were blowing things up, and they blew up his businesses. And he lost his restaurants and had to declare bankruptcy, and he was crushed. And ever since then, he'd been trying to recover. It'd been over 15 years. And he was devastated by that. And he looked at me and these hurtful eyes and expressing his pain. And he said, I never thought I would be doing this, driving a bus. And that's when it dawned on me, for some people it's work, Tommy, and for some people it's a calling, Igal. There's two different ways to do everything. And you meet people like that have an attitude. They don't want to be there. They're resentful. They're angry. They will say mean things. They are like there's a conspiracy. The least amount of work for the most amount of pay. They're looking for lawsuits. They're looking for ways to get you. They've got this attitude. There's this other way of going about life, and that's what Brooks is talking about. There's a calling, vocation, a calling that I am called to do this, to live in this way. And with that, then it's so transformational. On July 14th of this year, my little brother, I have a brother, Alan. Some of you know him. He actually worked in student ministries when he was at ORU at Asbury. And so Alan, I'm very proud of him. He's my little brother. He's 6'3". He got my dad's height, not my mom's. I got my mom's. So Alan, I'm very proud of him, National Merit Scholar, as was my sister. My dad had to pay for me all the way through college and seminary. But Alan is really, really smart, and I'll brag on him a little bit. He is the president of a healthcare system. He's the CEO, president of a healthcare system in San Antonio. And he'd done several of these in hospitals and had his own hospital. He was the CEO of a hospital. And when he moved to this new place in San Antonio, had got another hospital, and now he's the president and CEO of 10 hospitals. He doesn't own this $2.2 billion revenue stream. He doesn't own it, but he runs it. And I couldn't remember because he'd been in different places. I said, Alan, and he actually worked at Kaiser Rehab. He ran Kaiser Rehab at Hillcrest here. Somebody in the lobby this past Thursday who's in BSF told me Alan was her boss. I said, I hope he was a good boss. She said, So, Alan's supposed to watch this online too, by the way, so, you know. I asked him, I said, Alan, what was the name of that healthcare system that you're running in San Antonio? And he said, Tom, I'll say it very slowly for you. It's called Methodist. So he has 10 hospitals, 11,000 employees that ultimately report to Alan. So it's a very, very good job. So he spoke at Abiding Harvest because Alan and Chris Buskirk were best friends at ORU. And so Alan asked the question, as I'm there with Dana, he pointed to me and he said, so, we got a question for you. Do I have a vocation? Or is it only my brother who has a vocation? He said, because I grew up in churches and I heard that people were called into the ministry. Does that mean I'm not called to do what I do? And he said, if you think I'm not called to do what I do, we need to have a transformational conversation after the service. He said, absolutely, I'm called. Now, we have different paths. So I went to ORU. I asked what the easiest major was. They said religious education. That's what my major was. So I have a theological degree. And Alan did biomedical engineering. I went to seminary at Asbury Theological Seminary. Alan went to the University of Virginia, got a master's in biomedical engineering. I got a doctorate of ministry. Alan got a master's in business administration. So we've had two different paths. We're called in different ways. Alan's a Christian. He has influence. He is called. There's only a small percentage of people that will ever work on a church staff. If we think only the people that work on a church staff have been called, we have completely missed it. I don't know what your job is. It could be building homes. It could be real estate. It could be financial offices. You know, it was really cool today. Walking back from the chapel, our security guy that's with us today, Joe, caught me and he walked me over and he said, you know what? I like that sermon. And he said, I'm called to be a security officer. And I said, we know that. You meet people, you greet people, you're kind to people. You're not out there like pistol whipping them, you know? I mean, you're gracious. We love you for that. And it's a great place to work. I'm called. And I may be called as a single mom to my family. Is that a calling? Do we think that's an easy job? Oh my goodness. I've been around grandchildren now. I have to take naps after being with them. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. So what we've got to say is that this vocation is so very important. Wherever you are, that you've got to see that this is not a job. This is not just work. God has called me to this place. And when you see it that way, it's transformational. And you engage in all kinds of things that are different because vocation is about relationships. And when you go in and you say, you know, significance comes out of the relationships, and I can have relationships with people at my work that I can lead with significance. And I can make a difference in the way that I cut their hair. I can make a difference in somebody's life by the way that I clean the floors, by the way I go about emptying the trash, by the way I talk to people on the phone. I can make a difference in what I do because what I'm doing is very, very significant. So in Colossians 3, he says, whatever you do, whatever your work is, everybody's called. Whatever you do, he's not just talking to the preachers here or the missionaries. Whatever you do, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever your job is, turn it into a vocation. And he says, work heartily, that is with your whole heart. Don't withhold. As for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You're serving the Lord Christ. So again, this is based on relationship. Let me say a couple of things. Number one, if you're young and getting started in work and vocation, David Brooks says, if you're young and you really want to make a difference, know that you're not going to you don't start at the top. You start at the bottom and you work your way up. And he said, I really like this. I've never heard this before, but he said, if you're young and you're entering the job force, say yes to everything so you're going to be able to figure out what it is. Somebody gives you an invitation to come, go and do that. And this is one of the things I remember from my brother. Alan would always say to his boss, I can do more. Wasn't trying to wiggle out of responsibilities and try to do less. And I think that's got a lot to do with why Alan's been successful. He figured out a way to help his boss and to make himself useful. It didn't create turmoil, got along well with other people, worked through hazards, not always had great bosses either. There have been some real challenges Alan has had. But if you're young, that would be my word of advice. Say yes and try to do more than is expected. Do more than is required. Second, I would want to say something, a word to single parents. I don't know how you do what you do. With kids and a full-time job, I hope our church will be especially responsive to the needs of single parents. This is really, really a hard time, and it's really difficult, and there are all kinds of ways that we can volunteer around here to help. Children's ministry, student ministry in particular, we need to have a real eye for those folks. I would also say a word, much of our congregation are folks who are retired, and if you look in the Bible, you'll not find the word vocation, you'll not find the word Trinity, and you'll not find the word retired. Retired is not in the Bible. You can retire from a job or a vocational calling, but you don't ever retire from the faith. And one of the great strengths of our church is our willingness and eagerness of our retirees to jump in and to volunteer. We could not operate were it not for our retirees. And so as I, this past Thursday, had that wonderful birthday when the government gets involved, Medicare Day, I'm thinking of that and, what will I do after I, quote, retire? I will still be involved. in ministry in some way, somehow, doing what you love. So, retirees, you probably don't have kids to run to soccer games this coming Saturday. You can be at the WCA event. Retirees, you're not having to do the laundry tonight to get ready for your kids ready and lunches and all that. You don't have to go to the store and shop and all of that. You can do that tomorrow, but tonight that's what young families are doing. You can join us tonight in our time of prayer. So, retirees, you're kind of the backbone of our church, and you need to own it. And go on cruises, enjoy your all the things that you do, go enjoy that. But we need you here. We need you engaged. Wednesday nights with choir and orchestra or Tuesday nights with me, you can pick or choose. So I also want to tell you, I think that you need to see this as an opportunity to witness. Alan said, I don't hire people to be Christians. I hire people to work. Don't mess up your witness by the way you work. Show up on time. Have a good attitude. Look for opportunities to expand. And so when Alan was speaking at Abiding Harvest, he said something I thought was really interesting. He said, we went to the world's greatest high school, Will Rogers High School, which was a transitional high school at the time and still is. In many ways. But Alan said that he always had, he's 10 years younger than I am, he always had a heart for those students that had ambition and drive and had good character but didn't have many opportunities. And so he went to a school superintendent in the San Antonio area, introduced himself, said, I've got 10 hospitals and I've got different places. I tell you what, if you will give me these kinds of students that come from challenging places that have maybe not the greatest opportunities and not the greatest support at home, if you will do that, I will give them a job that pays the going rate, and on top of that, we will pay, as long as they work for us, even in a part-time job, we will pay for their college education. And he said, the biggest problem in San Antonio is the unemployment rate is so low, anybody can get a job anywhere. It's like 2.4%, something like that. And he said that what will happen is that they'll come and work in Methodist healthcare system, and then Taco Cabana pays $1 an hour more, so they'll leave and go over and work at Taco Cabana. So he said, I've got to do something to retain them. And by doing this, he said, on July 14th, 37 of 38 students that we have employed are with us still. We've given them this opportunity, and they're responding. I said yesterday when I talked to him, I said, so it was 37 of 38. What is it now? And he said, well, I don't know exactly, but we're in the 60s. And then he said, tomorrow I'm going to be meeting with a different school superintendent, and I'm going to tell that superintendent, I think our hospitals can do this for 100 students per year. Do you see what's happening? Vocation, that his vocation is going to add significance. And you know how Alan feels? Not happy. He feels joy. And this all ties together. And of course, I told Alan, I said, well, you're way behind the curve, because we told students at Oral Roberts University that if you'll come and you'll work on our staff in children's ministry or student ministry, we'll pay your way through Asbury Seminary. We've got 7 Asbury Seminary students that are on our staff. So I said, there. Older brothers, that's what they're there for. So, but this is what I'm saying, is that our jobs don't have to be drudgery. Sometimes maybe they are. Our vocation can have great meaning, and we can have great impact. And so as we go through this, I just want to say, I know some are struggling right now because that you have lost your job or you're in a job transition. We have some folks that have done that, have been there, and we have a ministry that tries to help folks that have lost jobs. We can help you with that. Some of you are very unhappy in where you are in your job right now, and that may be because God's working in your life, or there may be because you've got a bad attitude. I don't know. It's all across the board. but there are folks that can counsel you and talk with you. There are folks that are retired and need to see what they're doing now, not as just, well, let's just pull up the rocking chair. You need to say, God is calling me into the ministry. I can help. I can be part of Acts 29. I can do something. There's some place for me to serve, a way for me to find significance in my retirement years. And as we go through this, I don't know what it is where you need to be, but I want you to know that this is a very significant opportunity for each and for every one of us. We all want to improve, that we all want to make commitments so that we will have our true identity rooted not in our jobs, not in our work, but our true significance will come through a relationship, through Jesus Christ. And that's who offers us the best example of someone who came, who was called to serve, and that's who we are. So, this morning as we come and we receive the sacrament of Holy Communion, I would ask that you would direct your prayers in a very intentional way for these as we have described. Maybe to pray for somebody that is in a transition in their job, or somebody that is trying to figure out Medicare and all of the different options that you get with Medicare. You might want to pray for them. You might want to pray for somebody that is struggling with disabilities, and there are things that are taking place. There are all kinds of ways, but I would like to focus that our church would be people that are really, really committed to living a life of significance, and that we show up and that we do the work that God has ordained for us to do. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.